for listening to the 77th ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast, brought to you by 106 Apparel and recording from the Revel Advertising Studio in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Albert, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great, Cameron. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Wonderfully.
That just makes my day to hear that about you.
Oh, well, I'm happy to make your day in that way. Kyle, the Mizzou basketball team's winning games. I'm ecstatic.
You're pumped.
Yes.
Ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
Ready to talk about it.
Yes. I wish we could have had 2 episodes this week, like right after the games. I envy anyone who's able to just like who is it? There's a former Mizzou player that like does Periscope videos all the time.
TJ Moe.
Yes. He just like during football season,
Yeah.
because that's kind of his sport more than basketball.
Are you referring to an emergency podcast?
Yeah. Or just like he just like turns that phone on and he's just like ready to go with his takes at halftime of the football game and then
Just live
at the
stream.
end, yeah, just ready to go. But we got a little different.
We have the
setup
technology
here.
available to
we
us to do that.
Do it. Maybe that's something we'll play around with in the future.
Maybe so.
Something that we have been playing around with recently is YouTube. We are there. Full video of us in the studio talking to you. You can go subscribe. If you have a Gmail account, then you automatically have a YouTube account. It would be wonderful if you would be a subscriber, even if you don't plan on using YouTube as your primary way to listen to us. Still helps out.
Go check out our goofy looking faces.
Yes, see what we look like. Face reveal at 1,000 subscribers. And check out our Instagram. Might post a few little clips there. See something interesting. But Kyle, I think we should go ahead and get into the news. We got a few news items, then we can talk about that awesome basketball team. I knew it was coming that time, and it still surprised me.
Yeah, scared me a little bit.
First up, Vashon Sr. Kobe Clark commits to Georgetown. You actually alerted me of this news earlier, but I checked it out, and it is legit. He announced a commitment to Georgetown, so you're an excellent source. I'll trust you from now on.
Thank you very much.
I found it interesting. They also have a commitment from one Jamari Sibley.
Really?
Yes. Producer Cameron's pick for MVP of the Bass Pro Tournament of Champions from Oak Hill Academy.
How'd that work out?
Bad.
He fractured his wrist during the tournament and did not play all the games.
My prediction, not my actual MVP.
Right. Yeah. You thought he had a chance to win it.
Yes.
But
not even close.
Back to Kobe Clark, though. He is joining a long list of Vashon players to play Division I basketball at the high major level. He'll be playing for Patrick Ewing. And we thought maybe some of the local teams might have a shot at him, but Mizzou was never really that interested. I thought St. Louis made a lot of sense. I kind of hoped maybe Missouri State would get involved, but he's going to go east.
Yeah, I didn't really know anything about his recruitment other than the fact that Mizzou had not offered. But so, I mean, I guess I would think Georgetown kind of came out of nowhere, but I'm not going to pretend like I was following his recruitment super closely either. So best of luck to Kobe Clark. Speaking of Vashon and CBC,
Yeah.
they played a game recently, and Vashon ended up winning that. A lot of star power in that game. Obviously, Caleb Love for CBC, I think he had like 31 points, and Cameron Fletcher had like 20-something points.
And one of my favorite guys, Nick Kern, he had
like 33 points.
Yeah.
He's
junior.
Yeah, he plays really hard, man.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good
So
player.
I think he might be on the radar for a few schools of note coming up soon. Let's stick with basketball for a sec. We talked previously on previous episodes about Jaden Jones. He's a 2021 recruit from St. Louis, and he was in Columbia for the Arkansas game. He had also watched the Mizzou-Illinois game. He did not have a scholarship offer from Mizzou, though, and it looks like that he will never get one because he trimmed his list a little early for a 2021 guy, but he trimmed it to 5 schools, and Mizzou did not make the cut. Of course, they didn't offer him a scholarship, so if he was going to cut, then they probably wouldn't make it anyway. I believe the final 5 for him were Alabama, LSU, Rutgers, San Diego State, and Arizona. So
nice job.
Quite a variety there. Teammate, high school and AAU teammate of Jordan Nesbitt, who we've talked on the podcast before. We've talked about him not having a offer from Mizzou as well. So, I don't know, maybe just nothing going on in St. Louis for 2021. Switching over to football news, former Mizzou safety Khalil Oliver is now on the coaching staff. Just kind of an unnamed defensive coach. Doesn't really have an official position, but that's always nice to see, and interesting that a Barry Odom player is latching on with the new regime.
Yeah, that was basically my biggest takeaway from that. It's just good to have more consistency from a pretty good and improving defense holding over to the next staff. And so it seems like even people that maybe had the opportunity to go somewhere else or maybe even follow Barry have stuck around in the program, and it shows that they probably believe in Coach Drinkwitz.
Former Missouri wide receiver LaDamian Washington had his first touchdown catch as a St. Louis Battlehawk.
Yeah, that was cool to see.
Yeah.
Seen a lot of...
They were kind of out of the game at that point, so it was kind of garbage time touchdown, but he caught like a screen pass and just took it to the house.
Yeah, just ran right by all the
Showed
defenders.
off his wheels.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go to a Battlehawks game?
Probably. Maybe.
We should.
Might as well try. They sold out the lower bowl.
It's in the Dome, Edward Jones Dome. Is that what it's still called?
I don't know. I think it's just called the Dome at
something.
America Center.
Yes.
I'll actually be there this weekend. That's
that's where they have it?
yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
the trade show I'm going to. That's all the news I have, Kyle.
Yeah, it's been a pretty quiet week as far as news goes. Obviously, the big story was Missouri basketball kind of turning things around, at least temporarily. So we're going to be talking about that a lot. But other than that, there wasn't a whole lot going on.
I don't think there's anything temporary about it, Kyle.
Oh,
I think
here
it's
we
going to
go.
continue for many years to come. No, I don't know that, but we might as well get into it. Missouri beat Auburn. Auburn was the 11th ranked team in the nation, according to the AP poll. Of course, we talked about they were without Isaac Okoro, fantastic freshman who's likely to be a lottery pick in the NBA draft. And apparently he was the guy that kind of made everything work for them because they have dropped another game since then. However, going into this one, full house at Mizzou Arena. Love to see it. Former Tigers in the house, Matt Lawrence, Michael Porter Jr., Adam Wolf, and I'll admit it, I didn't know what John Brown looked like, but he was there too. He's older, and so...
But he was there.
He was there.
Supporting.
And yes, love to see that. I think what were our predictions like? You said you saw a path to a victory for Missouri.
Yeah, I thought that the game had a chance to be close, and because I just felt like Auburn had been kind of playing with fire a little bit. You know, they'd had a lot of close games, and I think that they had kind of showed a blueprint for how to beat them. And we knew that Isaac Okoro there was a potential that he wasn't going to play, and so I think I just was like, okay, I think he's not going to play, and this is how Missouri's going to do it. And I didn't say they were going to win, but I definitely saw a scenario in which that I wouldn't be surprised if they won.
If I told you last week that Auburn was going to shoot 1 of 17 from 3, that probably would have made you feel pretty good about maybe.
Definitely, and
Missouri's
we knew that
chances.
that's not their strength coming in, and that a lot was going to depend on their post players and
Austin Wiley.
He still scored like 22 points or something like that. So he's a great player. Still played very well, but didn't get enough from everybody else.
So Auburn jumped out to a 10-5 lead But then Mizzou went on a little mini 6-0 run to make it 13-10. Then the teams traded baskets for pretty much most of the first half. But Mizzou kind of held on to a pretty decent lead for the second half of the first half. The last 10 minutes of the first half, Missouri just kind of held on to this 2 to 6 point lead. And then right at the end of the first half, Drew Smith made a 3, put the Tigers up 9. Trey Jackson made a 3. And then after a stop, Pinson made a third 3 in a row to right at the buzzer to make it a 13-point lead going into halftime. And that was, I think they scored like 43 in the first half, and it was one of the better halves they played all season.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so much fun. And I've watched the game twice now, and yeah, just that last 5 minutes was, I don't know. Like, I really believed they can win this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at halftime. And I feel like sometimes, like in the LSU game in particular, we were up at halftime, but I was just like, I don't know that we hang on to this. I don't feel great about it. But for some reason, something about this game, with the crowd behind them, and just, I mean, we were really destroying them in a lot of ways, and taking advantage of the fact that they were down a star player, and I felt good about it at that point. And Penton was just going crazy too, looking super confident.
Yeah, it's just incredible how different this team looks when they hit shots from outside. I mean, when Trey Jackson or Kobe Brown are knocking them down, Pinson can, Drew Smith, when Pickett puts one in, it's just like this is how it could be all the time,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's not like, I mean, in this one, Missouri didn't shoot that many threes, but they shot 54%, 7 of 13.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can't ask for that every night, but even 7 makes in 20 attempts, that's serviceable. You can work with that.
I still think the key to this team being successful, and it's something that I've talked about for what seems like every week on this podcast for this season, is just confidence. The players' confidence. The players being empowered to perform their role that they're expected to do and not be afraid of making mistakes, because, you know, early on in the season we had more players that were available to play. We were playing 8 or 9 guys, and I felt like guys were getting pulled so fast whenever they were doing something bad or whatever. And so now that the depth isn't as available, and I feel like it's actually helping Missouri in the way that Pinson just and Trey Jackson are playing. Not only are they playing more minutes, but they're just playing important minutes where they're able to play their game and not be afraid to like mess up. If they mess up, they're just gonna stay out there. And it's almost like the season is not gone very well, and so the postseason play is probably out of the picture. So let's just go out there and not leave anything on the table and play the best we can. And I don't know. I think that just that mindset is so big right now in the success of the team, because they're just not afraid to mess up.
I agree. Very well said. In the second half, Auburn kind of closed the gap a little bit. They started getting to the free throw line pretty much. Seemed like every possession there for a while. Got the crowd riled up a little bit. But Mizzou was able to do the same thing. Just both teams were just kind of just selling out for getting to the basket and either making a shot or getting fouled. But then Mizzou went on a 12-2 run in the second half, and that ended with a Torrance Watson three-pointer to go up 64-47. And there was about 10 minutes left in the game at that point, and I texted you then. I was like, this is going to be a long 10 minutes. It's always long when you're, trying to hold off a lead or hold off a team from coming back, especially when it's an upset opportunity.
For sure.
But 64-47, and then basically that margin held for the next 5 minutes or so, and I was like, they're going to do this. I kind of have this thing in my head where this is kind of complicated, so stay with me here. I don't feel comfortable about a lead. In order to feel comfortable about a lead, I look at how much time's left. So let's say there's 4 minutes and 30 seconds left. I go up to 5. That's how many possessions I want to be winning by. So 5 times 3, I want to be up by 15 to feel comfortable. And that's a big number. But leads can disappear like that, and just being up by 10 with 5 minutes left is nothing.
I think we have been on the wrong end of comebacks so many times that we're just like kind of hurt at this point.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean, I can hear it in your voice. I mean,
I'm literally
you're still hurt.
I'm literally like quivering. I'm about to cry. I'm so upset by it still. Especially, I'm about to bring up LSU again. The LSU game from last year where they came back from like 13 points in like a minute.
Yeah.
You know, like, and you're exactly right that it just seems like the game is so much longer whenever you're trying to preserve that lead against a really good team. Like, how in the world are we up 15 or whatever on Auburn? Like, surely this is not reality. They're going to come back and win this game somehow because that's what good teams do. And they've done that recently to other teams.
But I started doing that math in my head, and I was like, I think I'm at like the threshold where I can feel kind of good about this lead.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a strange feeling. So it's like, I think they've got it. Auburn started pressing and trying to trap and stuff, and Missouri just seemed to handle it fairly well. I mean, they got through it. They found Parker Brown twice for dunks. He got called for a technical for hanging on the rim. I don't know. I think the line between letting a player hang on the rim to like secure their landing versus that like split second where it's too far seems arbitrary and not worth paying attention to if you're a referee.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really. It's just whatever to me. I don't. He hung on the rim longer than most people do, but
yeah, I would. Now I'm never going to be upset about an opponent hanging on the rim, especially if there's 1% chance that you could say that he was just trying to make sure he didn't land on anybody.
It was clear that it wasn't like he was like showing somebody
didn't
up.
Like do a pull up and you know try to stand on the rim or anything.
Yeah, but I felt like the game was not over, but I felt pretty good at this point, so I was just like, whatever, I don't even care.
Yeah. Well,
I'm in a good mood.
The second dunk on that press break was like with a minute and a half left, and it was just like, wow, like they done it. They cruised to the finish line.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen that from a Mizzou team in the last 6 seasons where they just take a team that should beat them and just cruise to the finish? I mean, we have Florida from this year, but Florida is a different team than this Auburn team. Mm-hmm. And maybe Auburn's completely different without Isaac Okoro, but I mean, Auburn lost to Georgia since then, so I guess you never know. But
on the road.
Yeah. But this just never happens where Missouri just gets a lead and just cruises.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It was not that long ago that in a podcast that we weren't even talking about Auburn, we weren't even previewing them yet, but they just came up in conversation because they were playing so well. And coming into the Mizzou game, 22-2, I don't care what Power 5 league you're in, that is really, really impressive. And considering all the talent they lost last year and coming off a Final Four run, if you subtract their last 2 games, they have had a phenomenal season. And I think when Okoro comes back, I think they'll be just fine. I think they'll probably still go to a Sweet 16 potentially and maybe farther. I think they're definitely good enough to do that. I think they still might win the SEC. They've got a good shot. So I think they're down a game to Kentucky now. But I still think they're definitely good enough.
I still think every SEC team is going to lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But
that's a possibility.
We'll see. So your Ken Pom MVP for the game was Xavier Pinson. And he kind of sealed the deal at the end by getting to the rim, getting to the free throw line. He had 28 points. He was 10 of 12 shooting, 2 of 3 from 3, 6 of 8 from the free throw line, 5 assists. He did have 5 turnovers, but luckily the rest of the team only had 4. But Pinson just set a career high, I think, 2 games prior, and now sets it again with 28 against Auburn. And he just kind of was able to get to the rim whenever he wanted. He was literally the definition of creating your own shot and knocking down two 3-pointers. He was everything you could want.
Yeah, I mean, we've known that he's probably the highest ceiling player on the roster, but I'm not sure I ever saw this production coming from him, even maybe in his like junior or senior years, even with him playing to his full potential. I'm not sure I saw him, averaging almost 25 points a game in a 4-game stretch. He has just been playing out of his mind the last 4 games. It's been so fun to watch him just blow up, and just the combination of him and Drew, just both those guys right now are just playing so well. I mean, just doing anything they want.
Drew, like a completely opposite style.
Yeah.
He scored 28 points as well, like the quietest 28 imaginable, because he only attempted 14 field goals. He was 12 of 13 from the free throw line. He also had 2 assists and just 1 turnover. But those two guys, well, their 56 combined points was the most since Jordan Clarkson and Jabari Brown, when they had 61 back in February of 2014. And this game actually reminded me of that era of Mizzou basketball. Obviously, we had Konzo's first season that was, by all accounts, a success. But for some reason, this game reminded me of pre-Kim Anderson, the crowd at Mizzou Arena. Obviously, we had good crowds. You and I were at the Iowa State game, Konzo Martin's first game coaching in Columbia. Amazing atmosphere. Not a seat open in the house. But for just like a meat of the conference season, nothing too special about this game other than a big opponent in Auburn, and a already disappointing season, to see the crowd show up like this. That MIZ chant that broke out towards the end of the game, I don't know if they've done something different with how they have their mics situated with the crowd noise, but that was like, everybody on Twitter was talking about how it gave them goosebumps and stuff, and absolutely, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
We haven't heard it like that in a while.
When I was watching the game the first time, like live on TV, first I probably had like crazy thumbs, like tweeting a bunch of like hot takes and stuff, and I honestly didn't really notice the MIZ chant. Like, I just kind of heard it. But when I went back and watched it again a few days later, yeah, I mean, that really struck me how loud that was. I about brought a tear to my eye how cool that was. I mean, that was so loud. And I don't know. It's so cool. It's such a great chant.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And when the student section shows up and they're, one half of the chant, everybody else is the other half, it's just, I remember the NCAA basketball video game would have the chant during Mizzou games. And I don't know, there's just something special about it in a basketball arena that's a little bit more, it's enclosed, louder in the environment. Now, don't get me wrong, Furrow Field, when it's packed for a night game and everybody's doing it, is amazing as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think it's possible they've changed, SEC Network has changed something with how the mics pick that up.
They might have turned it up or something when they realized that was happening. I don't know.
I went back and watched some highlight videos of like amazing Mizzou teams, and it doesn't seem like the crowd was being picked up on the broadcast quite as well as it was in this one. But obviously, they were still really loud regardless.
Something about the collaboration between the two groups, like how it's going back and forth, is just so cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's genuinely one of the coolest chants in college sports, I think.
No bias at all.
No, absolutely not.
Let's see here. Missouri as a team shot 55% from 2. Already said 54% from 3. 22 of 29 from the free throw line. However, they committed 31 fouls. Reed Nico and Mitchell Smith both fouled out. 31 fouls in a regulation game that you win by 12.
I think it was Gabe DeArmond maybe did some research on fouls across Power 5 leagues, and the SEC referees are calling a whole foul, I think, more than any other referees in any other league. And I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure referees are not
specific to the league.
Yes.
In basketball. Yeah.
Exactly.
There's more crossover, but the league does decide on the pool of referees that coach or that ref.
Right. So it's not games. It's just the same old guys calling a bunch of fouls because they're that kind of ref or something. Yeah. It's genuinely,
and they're not only reffing SEC games.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if it's just the way SEC teams are playing defense, or I don't know what the case is, but it's really gotten ridiculous at this point. And I've already vented about how I feel about the frequency of offensive fouls. I think there's way too many offensive fouls. But in the way that some of these games have been called, in just my opinion, there's just way too many fouls in general.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've said before that college refs just aren't good enough at the job. They aren't able to perform their job to the skill level required. And that's not necessarily their fault. I just don't think that they're equipped as a three-man crew on the floor. I don't think they are equipped to officiate the game as dictated by the rules as they currently stand.
Right. And I'm not for a second going to pretend like reffing a college basketball game is easy. Like,
right.
I'm sure it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I think the rules make it too hard on the ref. I think there are some changes that could, I mean, we could come up with a rule set that would just be
I'm
perfect.
sure.
That would just take all the pressure off the refs and everybody would be happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Starting with move the three-point line back, because another thing, the three-point line was supposed to free up the offense.
You mean move it back as into its original position?
Move it back to where it was.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, don't move it back further from the basket.
Okay, I was about to be like, we're about to have our first official disagreement.
No, move it back to where it was previously, because in addition to making it just harder to make threes, we're stepping out of bounds on the sideline.
I know.
And that's just another area where you're like, you know what would help the offense? More turnovers because they're stepping out of bounds trying to get a corner three.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a tangent, but...
Well, speaking of fouls, I definitely was... If there's anything in this game, in the Auburn game, that scared me, was the fact that Missouri was getting called for so many fouls. And there was like one particular moment in the second half where I was like getting furious. I was watching this game with my family. They're really not very like involved. They're Missouri fans, I guess, but like my family was like getting irritated alongside me because, at one point I think Missouri had been called for 7 fouls in the half, and Auburn had 1 foul called against them. And there had just really been some questionable calls just in general.
Auburn shot 46 free throws.
It's nuts. And I was like, Auburn's not playing well enough to get back in this game, but if they do get back in this game, it's for that reason only. And it just seems like we've had a lot of those games recently where Missouri's playing well, but and I'm not trying to say that they don't foul a lot, but every week here I am just screaming about like foul discrepancy. But
sounds like a Kyle problem.
It just like I even think I tweeted something like, am I just like out of it here? Am I just looking at this through my black and gold glasses, or does it really seem like this is just getting ridiculous?
Well, I saw another person on Twitter that was talking specifically. They were like, I can't remember who it was. I wish I could find it again, but it was not a Mizzou related person. It was just like a college basketball person in general. And they said, look at these foul totals from Missouri games, only Missouri games. And they were talking about foul totals for both teams combined. And it was like 52, 57, 49. It was just all these recent games with just astronomical foul totals. And I don't know, it's just like, why is this happening? It's the other teams that Missouri is playing against are getting called for a lot of fouls as well. Auburn got called for 24. If that was even 24-24, that's still a lot of fouls to be called in the game. I don't know. I think it's an SEC problem. I think it's a Missouri problem. And that combined, it's like the way Missouri plays is exacerbating an issue that's league-wide.
Mm-hmm. Jeremiah Tillman wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this climate.
Well, and I think it kind of shows a little bit more that it's not really Tillman's fault. We knew that. We knew that he gets called for like 2 bogus fouls a game, pretty much. But when you see Reed Nico and Mitchell Smith fouling out when they're the only solution at the 5, then obviously it's not necessarily a Tillman problem.
Mm-hmm.
But to some extent, it is a Missouri Tiger basketball problem. Anything else about this Auburn game?
I was looking at Bart Torvik.
Oh, sure. Trying to figure out a path for Missouri to get back into the NCAA tournament
Well,
bubble?
yes, but before I talk about that, I'm. Let me preface that conversation with saying I don't actually think there's a path, but I was just kind of playing around with it for kicks.
Sure.
But let me go
It's
back
very fun.
to the
Go
other
ahead,
thing
sorry.
I was going to say about Bart Torvik. It's a website similar to Kim Palm, if you're not familiar. I was kind of trying to see if Missouri had been playing with more tempo recently because it feels like they are. Bart Torvik says that maybe they are just a little bit, but it hasn't. It's still pretty consistent with what they've been doing for most of the year. I think at the beginning of the year, the first like 5 to 10 games were the slowest, and they've gotten a little bit faster tempo throughout the year. But I think that in my head, I feel like they're playing more up tempo, but I really just think it's they're just attacking more. And obviously, Pinson is a huge proponent of that as well as Drew Smith, but they're just making an effort to get easier shots, I think, or closer shots. They're getting to the rim, not settling for 3-point shots, and obviously that has been a huge reason why they've been scoring more points.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely intentionally pushing the ball in transition after a defensive rebound more than they did at the beginning of the season.
Definitely.
And if Pinson's out there, you have to exploit, teams not being able to stay with them in the open court.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the Ole Miss game that we're getting ready to talk about. The first score of the game for Missouri was Pinson just taking off after Ole Miss missed their first shot, and Drew just kind of lobbed it up to him for an easy layup. I was looking at Ken Palm also has a pace or tempo metric as well, just the number of possessions in the game. And they've been more consistently in the high 60s as of late in regulation, whereas the beginning of the season we saw 2 games in the 50s, 62. So, yeah, I think there is something to that. Maybe just playing a little bit more to the personnel instead of maybe trying to fit them into a scheme that maybe it's not best for them.
Do you feel like that is a philosophical alteration on Konzo's part, or do you think that's just something he feels like he's just pushing more because Pinson's out there?
I think if you asked him, he would not say that he cares too much about the pace of the game. I don't think he's like saying necessarily we need to keep this under so many possessions. Maybe he is, but I don't think he would tell you that.
He's probably not saying it exactly like that.
Yeah, I think he would say take opportunities as they come, but when we're in the half court, we're going to run our offense and try to get the best shot. So I think he's all for pushing the pace in transition after a miss, after a turnover, but I don't think you're ever going to see Missouri pull the trigger early in the shot clock very often, just as a rule, like for the offense for an entire season. My phone's ringing. Anything else about the Auburn game?
It's a great win. It's obviously in a season that's kind of lost at this point. It doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but in that regard, but it's so huge for a program that has just been kind of dormant all season, and it's good to see fans and back in the arena, and especially fans that are participating in the game and getting loud and crazy. It's a beautiful sight.
Yeah, I was hoping that might carry over a little bit more to the Ole Miss game than it did.
It is a Tuesday evening.
Yeah, and Ole Miss is not the marquee matchup that Auburn is, at least on paper. But yeah, still I think the count was like 8,000 something.
Yeah, still pretty good.
Which is fine. In this one, Missouri had a tougher time. It didn't seem to come as easy for them against Ole Miss. They did get off to a faster start though. They had a 7-2 lead, and then 17-12. But then Ole Miss really didn't let them get too far away, and the lead was 31-27 Mizzou at halftime. Missouri did not shoot the ball well in the first half, just 31%, including 2 of 13 from 3. But they were 9 of 10 from the free throw line, and Drew Smith had 10 points and 4 rebounds, and Pinson had 8. So it looked like kind of picking up where they left off on the offensive end of Drew Smith and Xavier Pinson kind of leading the way. Brian Tyree, we talked about him in the preview, how he will be inefficient from time to time, but he's still going to get points, and he can single-handedly keep Ole Miss in games. And he had 15 points on 10 shots in the first half, so he was scoring and was fairly efficient. Luckily, the rest of his team couldn't do anything else. How were you feeling at halftime in this one? I felt like Missouri they didn't have to play as perfectly to maintain a lead in this one. And it was all about hoping Brian Tyree missed enough shots, basically.
Pretty much. I think once you show that you're capable of winning games, people start to take notice. And I have never sat in the room whenever a college basketball team is watching film. I have no idea if this is really true or not, but I tend to think that people probably pay attention in film sessions a little bit more whenever they respect you as an opponent. And when what Missouri has done in the last few weeks, or maybe in the last week or two, I think commands some attention in the film room. So I definitely think that some of the things that they were maybe getting against Auburn weren't coming as easily against Ole Miss. So I definitely agree with you there. I felt okay at halftime. It's kind of just what I thought would happen. I knew this would probably be a close game. Ole Miss is playing really, really well recently, and the run definitely came from Tyree in the second half. Like I definitely started getting a little nervous in the second half.
Yeah, Missouri stretched out to a 10-point lead kind of in the first 10 minutes of the second half, and then Tyree just hit everything. I mean, he had a stretch. It was a 13-1 run for Ole Miss, and they took the lead 58-56, and Tyree had 10 points in a 2-minute span.
Mm.
So
you just have to expect that from him. Really, in a 40-minute game, he's gonna go off at some point, like against pretty much anybody, and that's what he's done, especially in the last month or two. He's just been phenomenal.
If I had to single out one play in the game that was huge, maybe the biggest play for Missouri, it was right here when, after Ole Miss went on this run, Ole Miss went up to 58-56. There was an entry pass to Parker Brown, I think, that I don't think he ever caught the ball. It just kind of ricocheted off him. He kind of hit it, and it ended up in Javon Pickett's hands in the corner, and he just drained a three-pointer, and it was like, that was super lucky, but it gave Missouri a 1-point lead and stopped that run, that basically Brian Tyree solo run, where I was like, oh, if he keeps cooking like this might get out of hand. Missouri's offense might not be able to keep up. But that was just kind of a random play where Pickett made a huge shot and kind of changed the momentum back to at least even, and that was just huge. And I still can't figure out how exactly that play happened, because Parker Brown got credited for an assist, but I don't think he quite knew what was going on there.
Speaking of Parker Brown, they probably couldn't have won this game without him. He's really been providing some quality minutes in backup of Reed Nico, and obviously in the absence of Tillman, he's been awesome, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do in the future, because he's still a redshirt freshman, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so he had some high major offers coming out of high school, a guy who is clearly talented, and his brother played for the School of the West. So, but, I'm not going to ignore that you have to be a super talented basketball player to play there. So, obviously, that runs in the family. They're a good basketball family. So, I think Parker had offers from Arizona, Illinois, some big programs. So, clearly a guy who has potential. But it's good to see him finally kind of showing that on the court. And he was really stuffing the stat sheet.
Yeah, 6 points, 7 rebounds, 4 blocks. 6 points, should have been 8. He had a huge putback slam that he got called for an offensive foul, which is just like, there was reports after the game that ref actually came up to him and said, hey, that was my bad. I messed that up. That shouldn't have been a foul.
Yeah. I wonder how often stuff like that happens. Probably not very often.
Not super often, probably. But yeah, I mean, what's funny about his performance in this game, he was on the floor for easily like more than double the most he had ever been on before. 24 minutes in this game. And I think a lot of, more casual Mizzou fans were like, who is this guy? And what is he doing? And why have we not seen him before? But funny story, we've talked before about how my little brother is obsessed with Mizzou basketball. I've passed that curse along to him. I should have taken him to a Duke basketball game. If I was smart, that's what I would have done. But anyway, he's all in on Mizzou basketball. He knows all the players' numbers. And I was explaining to him when he was over at our house last week that, and we were watching the game, and I was explaining to him how in college you usually get 4 years. You have freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. And I'm telling him, all the players, what grade they're in, how many years left they have to play. And just without me prompting him, he goes, what about Parker Brown? I was like, oh, he's just a freshman, so he's got 3 more years after this one. This was before he kind of had his breakout performance. He was already on the top of mind for my 6-year-old brother when most Mizzou fans, I don't think, could have named him as a member of the team.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think my little brother's way more invested in Mizzou basketball than I was at his age. And so maybe one day we'll have to get him on the podcast and record a segment with him.
Absolutely.
Let's jump back to Mr. Xavier Pinson, though, because he once again was the KenPom MVP. Down the stretch, he kind of just made sure Missouri was not going to lose. He was 6 for 6 from the free throw line in the last minute of the game. And even though Kadeem C. randomly made a 3-pointer to make it a 1-point game, Pinson was just right there, getting to the rim, getting fouled, making free throws, and then Brian Tyree did have a pretty good look to tie it with like 3 seconds left, but he missed, and Mizzou held on to win by 3, 71-68. Pinson, a new career high, 32 points, 4 for 4 from 3, 10 of 11 from the free throw line. He did anything he wanted to do, and overshadowed one of the best offensive players in the history of Ole Miss in Brian Tyree. It was the Xavier Pinson show. I don't know what to say. Like, he's just a sophomore. He's still going to have his ups and downs, but like you said earlier, this being the high mark for his career would have been a little bit of a surprise, a welcome one, but a surprise. And to see that in his sophomore season, I don't know. I'm blown away.
Yeah. I don't know at what level he's going to be able to continue this at. And kind of like I said a few minutes ago, once teams know you can do this, they're going to try to take away
but if he's
your
making
strengths.
threes.
But you're right. And I also believe in Drew Smith that he's going to, find ways to allow other guys to have opportunities on top of what he's doing and what he's scoring. I don't know, man. Like, they don't even have to get that creative with Pinson because he's that talented where he's just taking guys just straight up right to the hoop. And he's always kind of shown that he has that ability, but maybe he has trouble like finishing, or he just doesn't do it enough to establish a consistency. But he's truly just like that go-to scorer in the last 4 games that like we've been like coveting for so long. Like, we just need somebody that can take over the game, somebody that can kind of rise up athletically, and just do things that nobody else can do. And he's absolutely been that guy.
And you mentioned Drew Smith. He, again, had a good game, 17 points, 4 assists. So he was right there as well. I'm just imagining now, obviously, Pinson is playing more of the traditional point guard role in this offense, although the 2 lead guards are both of them are kind of playing a hybrid 1 and 2 at the same time, and they just kind of trade off who's kind of running point. But it's Pinson a little bit more often, but he's usually doing it to score. And I just can't help but wonder what this team would look like with this offensive mindset, but take Jeremiah Tillman, make him the guy that's setting the ball screen and rolling to the basket, make him the guy that's finishing lobs, and then put Mark Smith out there just, ready, shot ready in the corner. Mm-hmm. Last year's one of the best 3-point shooters in the country last year, just ready to pull the trigger.
Right. I do think that I've seen a lot of talk on Twitter and stuff like that about how this offense is better without them. And I don't really agree with that. I think that the fact that they're out have maybe given other guys the opportunity to rise up and say like, oh, wow, I'm capable of doing this.
And that's no guarantee. When a guy goes out, there's no guarantee that the other players are going to step up and
Sure.
realize that there's this gap that they have the ability to fill.
Right. And so now that they've done that, and now that I realize, oh, wow, I can go for 32 points and whatever. You're exactly right. Now let's start implementing that confidence and that knowledge with even better players in those other roles and see what happens. And yeah, I think that, with Drew Smith and Xavier Pinson doing what they're doing, and then mix in Mark Smith and Tillman back into the lineup, that'd be fun to watch.
We're potentially talking about 4 of the most used starting 5 next season.
Mm-hmm.
All 4 of those guys potentially returning.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're going to have to find a way to make it work. I'm totally fine with playing Mark Smith at the 3. He's a capable enough and versatile enough defender to guard a little bit bigger players on the perimeter and inside even.
Yeah.
Or you could have, if you want somebody to guard the opposition's, 3rd biggest player, put Drew Smith on him,
Mm-hmm.
and you won't have a problem.
Yeah.
So I think that those 4 players could be on the floor together for a lot of minutes and be really successful.
Yeah.
If anybody thinks that couldn't work, I disagree. Just think about the minutes that Javon Pickett and Torrance Watson are playing right now, and just kind of put Mark Smith in that role. He's just going to be a better shooter and a better defender,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much.
And I'm encouraged too by what has been the black hole of the power forward position. Kind of just Kobe or Trey, and now Parker's been playing some minutes at the 4. I'm feeling much better about the future of that position. And we knew at the beginning of the season that it was going to be rough, and we would probably not be able to get consistent production from that position. And sometimes Kobe plays more of a 3, but I've definitely been encouraged by the kind of the development of all 3 of those guys. And so even if Tillman doesn't return next year, obviously his future is probably as much up in the air as anybody's. I think that we'd be fine with our front court. Bringing in Jordan Wilmore, that's a little bit of a wild card. I don't really have any idea what to expect from him whenever he's first coming in, but I think we'd be fine. But I don't know, man. Props to Reed Nico too for he's played some incredible minutes. So I'll just give everybody a shout out because everybody's been playing better, man.
Yeah, Torrance Watson impressed me with his defense on this stretch. He's still struggling with his shot, and twice now in recent games he's made a 3, and then something else happened that created a turnover as he's draining a 3-pointer. You mentioned Reed Nico, though. In his recent outings, dating back to the win against Georgia, where he was the KenPom MVP, 6 points, 6 points, 13 points, 11, 3, 8, and 13. That is pretty solid.
Again, that's better production than I thought we'd probably ever see from Nico at
Yeah.
any point in his Missouri career.
Yeah, and this is a guy who, in the rest of his Mizzou career, has 2 double-digit scoring performances, and he has had 3 in the last 8 games. Anything else on this Ole Miss game? Parker Brown looking like potentially the most athletic player on the floor.
Yeah, his 2 dunks against Auburn in particular, he didn't just catch those passes under the basket and just put it up. He caught it, out in mid-range, almost 3-point line, and had to at one point, I think it was the first dunk maybe, kind of had to make a decision if he was going to pass it back out and kind of faked,
yep.
Yeah, and just drove it in and slammed it home. So he looked very comfortable out there, maneuvering in space.
Yeah, and he looked like if the defender had not bit on the fake, he looked like he was ready to just pass it off for the open shot.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Nico both have just had really, they've shown soft hands down low,
Yeah.
not turning the ball over. That was one of Tillman's biggest issues. When he wasn't in foul trouble, he was turning the ball over a lot.
Yeah.
And
He even shot a 3 in the Ole Miss game that didn't go in, but I thought looked really nice. Like, really nice touch on the shot, looked very comfortable.
yeah, I remember thinking I wish whoever passed it to him had taken the shot. I
Yeah.
think it might have been Drew Smith,
Mm-hmm.
but
I mean, he certainly looked like he was capable of making that,
and he
though.
was wide open.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like, maybe whoever threw it to him wasn't sure who was there, just knew there was a guy wide open. Now after 2 wins, Missouri is 13-13, back to 500, 5-8 in SEC play, matching their win total in conference play from last season. They are still just barely outside the KenPom top 100 at 104, 136th on offense, 103rd on defense. 10th on offense in the SEC, 12th defensive efficiency in SEC play. Still disappointing.
Man,
Disappointing when you look at it that way.
It'd be nice if they were still playing defense as well as they were at the beginning of the year. But we won't go into that.
No, that's a puzzling one. Next up, Mizzou travels to play Arkansas. After Arkansas lost to Mizzou in overtime, they went on to lose to Tennessee and Mississippi State and Florida. So they are now 16-10, 4-9 in the SEC. Yes, they're behind Missouri in the standings, but they're still 49th in KenPom, 102nd on offense, 26th on defense, and it looks like they will probably have Isaiah Joe back for this game. I see here, according to WholeHogSports.com, Musselman said he did contact in practice, and they just want to get some practices under his belt. He says, quote, "I don't know," when asked if he will play on Saturday. He says, quote, "We've just got to see. We don't know how his knee is going to react tomorrow or anything after practicing today." I think he plays.
Yeah, he probably will. And Arkansas has been terrible without him. I before the SEC season started, I thought Arkansas had a shot to win the SEC. Like, they were that good at that point in the season, firing at all cylinders. I think I ended up predicting them to finish third, but still, I thought that they had the ability potentially to win the SEC, and now they're in 11th or 12th place. They're on like a 4 or 5 game skid, all without Isaiah Joe. So clearly, he kind of like Isaac Okoro to Auburn is apparently the what makes that team tick. And I don't know what health he'll be if he does play, but I still think this is going to be a really tough game.
Maybe limited minutes, but if he can just come in and
Come home
to
They will be home.
Fayetteville and just make some threes, then that's all they really need from him is just a little bit of scoring.
Yeah.
And I think they'll be back to their winning ways very soon, which is not good news for Missouri. So Arkansas is currently 11th in the SEC. Missouri is 10th. So
if the
right
season
now,
ended today,
yeah, just avoiding the bottom 4 and those play-in games in the SEC tournament. However, Arkansas is favored to win. They are the favorite in each of their last 5 games.
Really?
Yes. So the toughest one being home against LSU. They got 3 home games, and then their away games are Georgia and Texas A&M.
A&M's been playing really well lately.
True. But I still think Mizzou really needs to win this one if they want to. You still can't guarantee that you'll finish above Arkansas in the standings, but if you win this one and then you're tied with Arkansas in the standings, that'll be huge for tiebreakers. Got one more for Missouri against Ole Miss, where all 3 of those teams I think are going to be neck and neck and neck in the standings at the end of the season. So those are going to be really big games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Missouri probably drops this game on the road with Isaiah Joe coming back. Arkansas is probably looking at this game as a revenge game. I shouldn't say nobody, but very few teams win in Bud Walton Arena. It, for whatever reason, is a very tough place to play. Missouri, I don't remember the last time they won a game there. Honestly, it's been a while.
Arkansas
I'm sure.
lost more this year at home than
It is true.
what is typical.
It is true.
Lost to Kentucky, South Carolina, Auburn, and Mississippi State.
All good teams.
2 of those without Isaiah Joe. You're predicting a loss then from Missouri?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to agree with you. I still think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be a close game. Arkansas does some things on defense that when they're especially playing at home, I think it's going to be hard for Missouri to combat. Oh wow, I didn't even realize this. Arkansas has the number 1 3-point percentage defense in the country.
Nice. Still, I think that they had that the first time we played them.
Probably.
Wow.
They are only 4th in conference play. So some of that is due to their abilities in the non-conference, but that doesn't bode well for Missouri. And I think, Mason Jones, he's kind of like Breon Tyree in that it doesn't really matter what's going on. He can put the team on his back. And if he's got a running mate returning, I see Missouri losing this one something like 77 to 70.
I was going to predict an 8-point loss, so that is comparable to what you just said.
Really hope they win, though, obviously.
You do?
Yeah, I shockingly, I hope Missouri wins.
That's a hot take.
Yeah. The listeners will be shocked by that.
Absolutely flabbergasted.
You ready to talk about Vanderbilt?
Yes, I am.
Missouri, unfortunately, has to go play at Vanderbilt in the ugliest arena
Strangest arena
in the world.
In the world.
Hate watching it on TV. If I ever stepped foot in the arena, I don't even want to say what
Careful.
I might do because,
This is a G-rated podcast.
it's a family-friendly podcast, and if any law enforcement are listening, I don't want them to know what I have planned. But that's a horrendous arena. But Mizzou has to go there and face first-year coach Jerry Stackhouse. Now he has already has tallied more conference wins in his first season than they managed last year. Of course, that is 1-0. They had a big win over LSU this year. I thought that might make you laugh because it's a big accomplishment that they've already have more SEC wins than last year. But we'll just move past that. They're currently 9-17.
Just like staring at you.
They're 9-17 overall, 1-12 in SEC play, 173rd in KenPom, 150th on offense, 210th on defense, 14th out of 14 in offensive efficiency in SEC play, and 13th out of 14 in defensive efficiency. Those are kind of numbers that Missouri is familiar with from a few weeks ago. Luckily, Missouri has improved. Vanderbilt, not so much. They actually had 8 wins in the non-conference, which I thought was interesting, although 5 of those were to teams ranked 290th or worse.
Yikes. Everything you just said would support Missouri has a pretty easy shot to win this game, but the
Except
fact
they have to play in that awful gym.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. The fact that they're on the road in that bizarro building single-handedly is going to make this game close, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think I do want to express my condolences to the fans of Vanderbilt. Not only do you have to watch your basketball team play in that monstrosity, but for the second year in a row, they lost their best player to season-ending injury. Missouri fans can relate to that. Obviously, last year for Vanderbilt, it was Darius Garland, who is now in the NBA. This year, it's Aaron Nesmith. And he was shooting 52% from 3 on 115 attempts when he went out. So that was not a small sample size. he was also shooting 50% from two. So basically, one of the top 3 or 4 or better offensive players in the SEC this season.
Seems like a lot of key players are getting hurt on several teams.
Probably the officiating.
Yeah. Anything I can blame on them, I will.
Yeah.
How long has he been out? Do you know?
Yeah, since like the beginning of conference play.
Oh, okay. So it's been a while.
I can tell you for sure, though. He last played January 8th against Auburn. That was their first SEC game. So basically the entire conference season. But they beat LSU at home without him.
Seems interesting that we have gone this long without playing a team in the SEC yet. Or is this will be the last team that we haven't played, correct?
Yes, correct.
What are your feelings on this game?
I think Missouri will win. Did you know that Vanderbilt has Scottie Pippen Jr. on their team?
No, I did not.
This is interesting. Scottie Pippen Jr., legitimately the son of multi-time NBA champion, probably Hall of Famer Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen NBA spells his name Scottie. Scottie Pippen Jr. spells it Scotty. Now, I thought that was against the rules of being a junior.
That's what I was just thinking. I was like, wait a second.
I think at the hospital, if you say, we'd like put on the birth certificate, Scottie Pippen Jr., okay, let's spell it Scotty, they'd be like, wait a second, that's not allowed. It has to be IE if you want to keep the junior. You got to pick
Pippen,
one.
he can do whatever he wants, man.
I guess. I just thought that was against the rules. But Scottie Pippen Jr.,
You're for sure it's his son.
I'm for sure. I triple checked because I was like, I'm not going to talk about
Did
this.
you just triple
and be
check right
wrong.
now?
No, I triple checked earlier.
That's good preparation.
This is like a quadruple check at this point.
Wow.
However, he's really good as a freshman, helping lead their team in the absence of their best player. So I just wanted to spotlight him. I figured since he plays for Vanderbilt and is a freshman, probably not too many people know about him, but he is, in fact, the son of NBA legend Scottie Pippen. And for that reason, Missouri's going to win 71-66.
I say Missouri wins 74-72. I think it's going to be a close one. It's going to be a close one.
Fun fact.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Via Wikipedia,
All right.
although his given name is spelled Scotty on his birth certificate, Pippen usually goes by Scotty with an IE, saying that people usually shorten the name to Scott if it ends in Y. So his birth certificate has
Scottie
Y.
Pippen Bull.
The Bulls, yes.
Wow.
The Bull.
Scottie Pippen the Bull.
I thought you were going to say, like, the father.
No, Scottie Pippen the Bull.
Okay.
Spells it, it's on his birth certificate with a Y, but
Yes.
doesn't want people to shorten it to Scott.
Yes.
So
Wow.
he goes by IE. Wow,
He
that
just
explains it all.
really, really likes the name Scotty.
And so the junior is legitimate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to file for it to be taken away from him, but
Yeah.
we don't have to do that now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he loses the game.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Just the basketball game.
Yes. We're both predicting a win for Missouri then. That's exciting.
Absolutely.
When was the last time we did that?
It's been a while.
Yeah, sure has. Where's Missouri finishing in the SEC?
I'm going to say 11th place. I think I was kind of looking at this the other day. The teams in front of them, and this was before Tuesday and Wednesday night game, I believe. So I think they were only 1 or 2 games behind A&M at that point, and then A&M ended up getting a big win against Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
So now I think that are they right behind Alabama in the standings? And how many games behind them are they?
Missouri's 1 game behind them.
I just don't think I see them catching who's in front of them at this point, and I'm probably more worried about who's behind them, which is Arkansas. So I think they'll move back a spot when it's all said and done. But hopefully they don't drop more than that. I know Georgia just beat Auburn as well. So Georgia's potentially surging. And so.
Yeah, Georgia's probably... They're probably not a threat to finish with 7 SEC wins, or even 6, in my opinion. Missouri should finish with at least 6.
Missouri does play against Alabama, so maybe
True.
that's an opportunity.
Yep, and
At home.
Alabama, they would still need some help. They would need Alabama to drop a game or 2 potentially. I don't know how the tiebreakers work exactly when you've split your head-to-head matchups, but yeah, unfortunately, I think you're exactly right. I think they will finish 11th.
Which would mean they were most likely playing Vanderbilt in the play-in game. Correct?
Yep. And then Mississippi State. Hopefully, maybe South Carolina can. They'd play the worst team of the second group, right? So they would play.
I think the conference tournaments are I think the opponents are set. So you would play. I don't know. I'd have to be looking at the bracket.
Yeah. I was thinking that they would play.
We'll probably know who they're playing against before.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was thinking they would play the top seed that's not in the top 4, but they would play the bottom seed that's not in the top 4.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be somebody like Alabama or Texas A&M or Arkansas. I think I'm thinking about that right, which I'd be all for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you got anything else for the folks? Kyle, if you notice.
I was just about to say, all I have is a grievance with you guys that you didn't put my closing lines on the page, so I have to try to remember
I'll be honest with
it.
you, I don't know how that happened. I must have not realized that it went on to a third page and
All
just
right.
printed the first 2.
Well, it may not be exactly right, but guys, you can find this podcast or any of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and we're on YouTube.
Yep.
And we're on Instagram, Twitter. We are literally all over the internet.
Yes.
Our faces are on YouTube.
I got to add something, though. My father-in-law was going to listen to our podcast. And, of course, he uses some – I hope he's listening to this. Hello, Todd. You're not watching on YouTube, but he uses some random podcast app that I never heard of. I'm like, oh, yeah, we should be on there, the Missouri Sports Podcast. Of course, we're not on there. Usually those smaller ones just pull their feeds from iTunes or somebody else. So I was kind of embarrassed that we weren't on his podcast app.
That is embarrassing.
We
That's
got him
why
set up with the Google Podcast app,
great.
so he's good to go.
Great. That's why I think a lot of national podcasts say we're on this, and anywhere podcasts are found because there's so many. Who knows how many little outlets out there.
It wasn't true in this case.
That's not true for us.
Yeah.
Anyways.
We're on the big ones, though.
We're on the big ones because we're a big podcast.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well.
Better hit him with that Twitter handle.
At Mizzou Sports Pod.
And you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
Thanks. I forgot
and
that
you can
part.
find me on Twitter at C_Albert08. I'm looking at it, so
because it's not that important, so
yeah.
I forgot about it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you next week.